Hey everyone, I'm Benjamin and welcome to my book club. Today, I'm not only starting a new book, I'm also going to trial a new method of reading that I've been reading about online. So I normally stick to physical books, occasionally electronic books if I can't get a copy of the book that I want to read. And I do also quite often listen to audiobooks. I used to listen to audiobooks a lot. I used to have about a 2-hour a day commute to and from work. And during that time, I listened to a lot of audiobooks. But I work from home now. My audiobook listening is not as regular. But this version of reading, I believe, is called Immersion Reading or Immersive Reading or Total Immersion Reading. And it's been suggested to me as a way to kind of like heighten the book, or if you're having trouble understanding the book, to help with that. And the idea is you grab your physical book and you read that while listening to the audiobook. And this is an interesting idea for me. I sometimes have music on when I'm listening to books. Normally they're like, hour-long things on YouTube that are like, soundscapes or something that are somewhat related to the series of the book. And I found they can often really heighten my experience. There's a couple soundscape videos that I can think of that are just tied to the book that I was reading when I was listening to them. I can put them on and I can just see myself in that world. Which is really fun. But I'm interested in giving this a go because my initial instinct is that it doesn't sound very good. I'm picturing myself struggling with a few things. First off, messing around with the speed of the narration to match sort of my reading speed. And then also, I often pause and think about things that I've read. And I guess pausing and then syncing things back up again could become an annoyance. Or if I want to reread a passage, having to go back 30 seconds using the back 30 seconds button and then figuring it out from there. But I'm also interested to see if it really does delve me deeper into the book, help me really experience it more. So without any further ado, the book I'm going to be reading is Red Rising by _P_S Brown. I've had this and the next two on my shelf for a little while because I found them at a thrift store. I think they were about $2 or $3 Australian dollars each, really cheap, and they seem to be in almost brand new condition. They're probably the best condition books I've ever found in a thrift store for some of the cheapest I've ever found. And they'd always interested me. I've always liked Hunger Games and whatnot, and I've heard that this is a step up from there. I've heard the first book is a little bit young adulty, but afterwards it really steps up. And me and my wife have recently just started watching the Hunger Games movies because she hadn't seen them. And it made me urge for that sort of, death contest sort of thing. And I'm not sure if that's what this is, but the back makes it sound like it might be. So yeah, I'm really interested in reading it. So I have the physical book. Part 1 done. I already had the audiobook on Audible. I've had an Audible account for over a decade now. But one of the books I picked up with one of my free credits, or maybe it was a free book at the time, I'm not sure, was Red Rising. And I think I picked it up years ago. So it's been sitting there for a long time. I found these cheap. I've been looking at getting into this immersion reading thing. I thought, now's the perfect time. So I think the way this video is going to go is I'm going to read a bit of the book. I might give a brief idea of how I'm feeling with the immersion reading thing going. I might give some short reviews of the book during the reading process. But after I finish the book, I'll come back, report back on what I think of the whole process as a whole, and what I think of the book, and whether I'm going to continue reading the next ones. But yeah, without any further ado, I'm going to start reading. So, I have my audiobook, I have my book, and I have my headphones. Let's get started. Yeah, already finding that the one-time speed is definitely way too slow. Let's try 1.5. The narrator so far is really great. I really like his accent. However, 1.5 might still be a bit too slow. I'm finding myself kind of read ahead a little bit and then muddling things up. During dialogue, he seems to slow down quite a lot, and then during descriptions, he seems to speed up quite a lot, so I might have a struggle finding the correct speed here. But I'm going to give 1.7 a go and see how that feels. I've finished the first chapter. Already it doesn't seem that young adult, you know, maybe it's a bit more later on. But interesting so far. Like miners underneath Mars, with like ruling classes above them. But as for the reading, I am still struggling. It's going to take some getting used to. I just found myself getting really interested in what was happening and read 3 or 4 sentences ahead of the narrator and then realised that I was meant to be listening. I think the benefit here is that it's grounding me. Like when I'm listening to the audiobook, if I just sat here and listened to the audiobook on its own, I'd probably drift. You know, I'd look over there at some of the books and think about them, or look at the dog and think about the dog. And then realise that I hadn't been paying attention and have to go back. Whereas if you're following along here, then your focus is on the book, right? The actual reading along with the narrator, I'm not sure how much reading I'm really doing, so much as just looking at the words at the same time the narrator's saying them. Because as soon as I start actively reading, I find I move ahead. But I don't know if I can turn it up any faster. He already sounds a bit chipmunky at 1.7. So I think I'm going to stick with 1.7 for now and give it a go. I might move up to 2 though and see how that goes. Alright, day 2. I read a lot yesterday actually. I'm up to page 250 something. So probably 3/4 of the way through the book. As for the book, I'm loving it so far. I'm really enjoying it. I don't love Darrow as our main character, but all the other characters are great. Darrow's fine. I'll get into that more in the review. I adore like death game sort of stories, so this is hitting that itch quite well. As well as tapping into the sort of like Roman Greek aesthetic that I really enjoy as well. So yeah, overall, the book, really enjoying it. As for immersive reading, I'm still not sold. I'm still not sure what I'm getting from this. When I explained to my wife what I was doing, she said, oh, so it's like subtitles, but for audiobooks. And I guess that's kind of what it's like. I don't feel more immersed than if I was just reading the book. I'm currently got the audiobook at 2.05 times speed, which is about the limit that I can stand to the narrator's voice. But it's still kind of too slow for me. In moments of high tension or action, when it starts getting really exciting, I keep catching myself being like a full paragraph ahead of the audiobook and stopping and going back. And I suppose perhaps it's supposed to be a way to slow you down, to like put on a speed limit on what you're doing. But for me, to get it to like the sort of level where I would listen to an audiobook in the car, which would be like 1 times speed, maybe 1.25 times speed, it's just glacially slow when I'm looking at the book. And I can't stand it. I'm just like, why am I actually even looking at the book? I suppose it's so like don't lose focus on the audiobook, but it's not working for me. So I'm listening to it at the faster speed. It's still slower than my reading speed, but we'll see how we go. So I'm just gonna jump right back in and keep reading. I just found myself about half a page ahead of the audiobook again. So I need to slow down and focus on the audio, I guess, and not on the words. It's a really hard thing to try and force myself to do. When there's songs in these books, normally in fantasy books, but sometimes in sci-fi books, anyone like when it's just like a few verses of song just written there? I don't. I struggle to figure out, what tune is the song meant to be, what note, what key's it in, how's it meant to sound, what the cadence of it is. That's a wrap on reading Red Rising. And whoa, oh my god, what a book. I've got a lot to say, but first let's talk about this immersion reading. So in the end, I did stick with that speed, the 2.05 times speed. that I was sitting at, which was admittedly probably a bit fast. I'd never listened to a normal audiobook that fast. But it was still quite a lot slower, actually, than I would probably normally read. I still caught myself, basically whenever there was tension or excitement or danger, or just a scene I was particularly enjoying, I still caught myself almost every time reading ahead of the book, of the audiobook that is. And that was challenging to try and get a hold of. It got to a point where when there were things heating up, I ended up having to get my bookmark and like physically cover the bottom bit of the book that I wasn't up to yet to keep myself in time. I think if you have trouble focusing on a book, this is probably fantastic. I'll admit there have been times in my life where, you're reading a book and you just drift off. Or where you're listening to an audiobook and you just sort of drift off and you weren't listening. Or, I think we've all been there when you're reading a book and then you realise that you've not taken in any of the information you've read, like half a page. You've been thinking about someone else while doing the physical act of reading. And it's very hard for that to happen when you've got both the stimulus coming at you like that from the physical book and the audio book. I basically never found myself drifting off. But I don't really have either of those problems. It's very rare that I have an issue that I've drifted off from a book. Look, I suspect the proper way of doing this immersion reading thing is at a much slower audiobook speed than what I was using. If you're doing this at 1 times speed, 1.25 times speed, and you're reading along slowly with the narrator, I'm sure it is very immersive, but I tried that and it was infuriating to me. Even at 2.05 times speed, this book took me an extra day and a half than it would normally. And I felt that slow pace. I felt it really hard and I kept wanting to rush ahead. So doing this whole book at 1 time speed, I think that would have been a 16-hour read. That's an eternity for my reading speed. And don't get me wrong, this isn't just because I don't like audiobooks. I love audiobooks. I've been an Audible member for over a decade now. And I always have probably 2 audiobooks on the go. I have an audiobook for myself when I'm driving alone, and I have an audiobook that me and my wife are listening to. But for me, I'm definitely sticking with physical books when I'm reading around in the house, and audiobooks when I'm driving around. And I think those 2 books are going to be separate. I think trying to keep track of your place in physical and audio and mimic them whenever you're driving or sitting down is going to be too hard. So I'm glad I did this. I had been wondering about immersion reading for a while. I just don't think it's for me. My main takeaway of immersion reading Red Rising is that ℓ𝕉 will forever be Irish in my head. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to separate him from the voice that the narrator has. Okay, that out of the way, let's talk about this book. What a book! I was expecting good things, because this has really high ratings, but I wasn't expecting this to be as good as it was. The story of ℓ𝕉 and his rise up from the mines and his fight through the trials and everything that gets placed in front of him was fantastic, but what really drew me in was the character work. ℓ𝕉 is an amazing character, and the surrounding characters of the likes of Cassius and Sevro and Pax and the Jackal and Mustang are just so wonderfully written. They're all very clearly their own characters with their own motivations, their own wants and needs, and they act in rational ways to achieve them. The plot is fantastic. The twists and turns it takes, some of which I saw coming, some of which I didn't, all make a lot of sense. I've definitely, I think as I said earlier in the video, heard that it is a bit young adulty. And having read it, I think that's just the comparison that they make to the Hunger Games, as they're both kind of battle royale books. Because this is a lot more violent and a bit more mature than a lot of the YA I've read in the past. Perhaps I've just read younger leaning YA in the past. But I struggle to call this a YA book. I think you need to be a little bit older than that to grasp what's going on here. And there are some dark concepts at play here, and there is some violence and some gore in here that I think is a step above YA. And I think this is far superior to the Hunger Games. I think the characters are better. I think the world building is exquisite. The Roman sort of architecture and world building at play is this neoclassical Romanism is fantastic. And I only have a few complaints about the book. The first off is probably that I just want to see a bit more of the world. I know that that's not really the story we're telling in this book, and I'm hoping we get a bit more of that later on. I loved the sort of enclosed battle royale thing, and I'm excited for the next stuff that might be coming along to do with those lines, but I want to see more of the wider world, and especially the sort of political systems at play. Apart from that, the ending kind of felt a bit rushed here for me. I feel like the last 5% of the book needed another 50 odd pages. It kind of felt like we were setting it up. And as I kept going through it, I kept thinking, oh, this section of the book's going to move through into the next book, you know? And then it was kind of a bit horrific for me to find out that, oh no, we're rushing to an ending right now. And the ending was great and I enjoyed it, but just a bit more time spent in that section of the book, I think would have really done well. And then my only other complaint is that our main character, ℓ𝕠𝕠𝕜, mostly things just kind of go his way, I suppose. A little bit Mary Sue-ish. Not always, obviously, but things seem a little bit convenient for him sometimes, which is fine. It works in the way of the story. But also, he is kind of a bloody idiot at times. I think he falls for the same trap 4 times, and I was just pulling my hair out by the end. By the second or third time it happened, you can't honestly be falling for this again. But that's part of the story. But beyond that, this is one of the best books I've read in a long time. I'm really excited to keep reading this series. I'm kind of shocked that I managed to pick these books up so cheap. I think I picked up the first 3 books for about $3 or $4 Australian each at a thrift store. So less than half the cost of a normal book at a bookstore. I got these 3 books, and at least the first one is definitely better than a lot of the other books I bought previously. As far as a rating goes, I was leaning to a 10 out of 10, but just that ending being a little bit rushed, and some of the bits in the book that I don't agree with, I think it comes down to a 9, but this is honestly just such a fantastic book. If I did half ratings, it'd probably be a half rating, but I think a 9 out of 10 I feel pretty comfortable with. Oh, and it's a bingo book. If you don't know what bingo is, I've got a video, you can see it up there, but long story short, it's a year-long readathon, different prompts, you read books that match those prompts. One of the ones that I talked about in my video is dreams, and the hard mode is that it just can't be prophetic dreams or magic dreams. And I didn't have a book lined up for this because, as I suspected, one day during the year I would read a book and there'd be a dream in it. It's hard to find a book that has non-prophetic or non-magical dreams before you read it. No, people aren't talking about that. And yep, in here ℓ𝕠𝕠𝕜 has some dreams, and they aren't prophetic. I obviously haven't finished the series. Maybe they turn out to be, but that would be very strange. So pretty sure they're just dreams. So yeah, locking it in, dreams. Red Rising. There you have it. Red Rising, 9 out of 10. Immersion Reading, I don't know. For me, a 2 out of 10. I don't know. It was fine. I enjoyed the narrator, but I won't be doing it again. But I do know what I'm going to do next. Often after finishing the first book of a series, I read something else. I try to change my palette for a bit before I continue with the series. But this time, absolutely not. Starting Golden Sun right away. And honestly, I can't wait. So, if you've read the series, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. If you want to leave a like, that'd be great. But most of all, just, keep reading.